Scream is a 1996 horror film that was directed by Wes Craven. And the plot is we see that this masked killer is going around in this small town and killing people. High school kids. And we see the main character, Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell, who a year ago her mother was murdered, so all of these recent killings hit pretty close to home for her. And through all the craziness, she eventually realizes that this killer's main target is her. Now, what I think of Scream is, I love this movie. I don't know how else to say it. I love this film. A while ago, I made a top 10 favorite horror movies. And sure, I'd say that some of the movies, maybe they're interchangeable, or maybe the spots on the list could be different now. But what still rings true is my number one favorite horror movie on that list. And that was Scream. I love Scream that much. It's my favorite horror movie of all time. And I know whenever I tell people that, and I'm sure some people watching this hear that and they think, really? Scream is your favorite horror movie? And it's not because it's the scariest movie I've ever seen, because it's not. It's because I love the writing. I love the tone. I love everything about these characters, the killer. The way this movie is presented, I think, is just damn near perfect. Let's talk about the beginning, because I still say today that this opening scene is the best opening for any horror movie. Of course, I'm talking about Drew Barrymore, who at the time, and still probably today, she's the biggest actress in this movie. So when you see her, you instantly think, holy crap, Drew Barrymore, she's the main character. And I love the fact that not only is that not true, but the way the scene plays out, where she gets the phone call, and at first it's sort of playful and flirty, the way how they're talking about their favorite horror movies, and of course you have that dig at the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels, because clearly Wes Craven resents those. The turn, like the moment when the killer just switches, and when Drew Barrymore starts to get a little scared, and she says, "What do you want?" and he says, "I want to see what your insides look like." That line, every time, creeps the hell out of me. It's so disturbing. And then even how the scene plays out, the way how he makes her play a horror trivia game and fucks with her that way. But then the moment where she's running, it's in slow motion, he comes up behind her, stabs her in the chest, just how real that looks. And then her parents find her hanging from the tree with her guts hanging out. It's so creepy, it's so disturbing, but it's such a holy fuck type of intro. It lets you know what type of movie you're in store for. And that's where we meet Sidney, like I said. And I like Sidney. I like Neve Campbell in this movie a lot, because not only for her backstory, her past with what happened with her mom, so obviously she's going through some traumatic stuff. And sure, that's, I guess, an easy way to get us to sympathize with her, but not only that, I like the scene where she first gets a phone call from the killer. And sure, she doesn't know that it's the killer, but the sassiness that she shows, the strength, the sort of brazen, the way how she calls the killer out on his bullshit when he says he's outside on the porch. She goes outside and she's like, "Well, where are you?" And she even picks her nose and she's like, "Can you see me? What am I doing?" Just the little things like that make me like her even more. But also the fact that she's a virgin. At least at the beginning of the movie, she's a virgin. And they point out in the film that in horror movies, if you have sex, you die. That's just a rule. And up until this point, yeah, that was true. But she has sex with her boyfriend, and that makes you go, wow. So what's going to happen now with her? Is she going to die? But that brings me to her boyfriend, Billy, because Billy's played by Skeet Ulrich. And Billy's just a creepy guy. I mean, sure, I appreciate the little movie references that he does, the movie quotes, but even I sit there and go, dude, like, calm down with the references. You're coming off very creepy. And even the way Skeet Ulrich is, he's super weird. Like, it's almost too obvious that he's at least a suspect. And I love how people make the comparisons between him and Johnny Depp, because sure, he has a similar look, but clearly he didn't have the same huge career that Johnny Depp did. But I do like the way that they sort of frame him. And it seems like, for the most part, because it is obvious he's the killer, I like how they present that. He gets arrested, and then she still gets a phone call while he's in jail. So then, again, you're questioning. You're like, wait a minute, but he has to be the killer. Randy, played by Jamie Kennedy, is by far my favorite character in this movie. Probably because I relate the most to him. I mean, sure, he's sort of the geeky guy who doesn't really have the most luck with girls, so maybe not in that respect. But the way how he loves movies, the way how he talks about movies, the way how he uses movies and the rules and uses them for regular everyday life, I feel like that's how I talk about movies with my friends. That's how I think about movies. I use them for real life, so it's refreshing to see a character in a horror movie who has seen every single horror movie, who acts like he knows every trope, everything that's supposed to happen. He knows all the rules. The moment where he's like, hey, these are what you have to do in order to successfully survive a horror movie. I love that scene because, again, I relate to that. Also, let's talk about some of the other characters, like Dewey, played by David Arquette. I really like Dewey. He might be like in second place as my favorite character because he's so goofy. And that's why he's likable, sure, it's because he's goofy and he gets made fun of a lot. But he is trying to figure out this killer. I respect the fact that he's almost the only cop who's come close to figuring out who this killer is. And his chemistry with Gale Weathers, played by Courtney Cox, is great, obviously, for obvious reasons. But not only that, I like Gale. Of course she's a bitch, but that's the point. She's the bitchy character that you love to hate, that you love to watch, because the moment where she's chasing down Sydney and she's trying to figure out the details on what's going on, and you think for a second maybe she really does want to get to the bottom of the truth and maybe save an innocent man's life, but no, she's worried about her book sales. Such a bitch. The moment where Sydney punches her in the face is priceless. Also, Rose McGowan as Tatum, Sydney's best friend, Dewey's sister. I really like Rose McGowan. I almost forget how funny she is in this movie because she's sort of in the background, but she's constantly saying funny stuff, mostly when she's making fun of her brother. So her death scene especially, I remember really hating it. When I first saw this, I just went, oh, come on, she's one of the prettiest girls, she's funny, and she dies in such a horrible way. But now, I admit, it's pretty memorable, her death scene. Henry Winkler is the principal. Holy crap, the Fonz? It's just worth it to have him as the principal, even though a lot of my friends always make fun of his death scene and say how horrible of an actor he is when he dies. But you know what? That's going to bring me to the end of the movie, which, I mean, how many people haven't seen Scream by this point? So I doubt I am spoiling it for people. But again, spoiler warning. The scene where we find out who the killer is, or who the killers are. Billy and Stu. So it does end up being Sydney's boyfriend, Billy, and his friend Stu. Just the craziness in that scene, the way how they're just talking to her about what they've been doing, why they've been doing it. And even initially when they say they don't have a motive, they're just doing this just to do it. That is so creepy to me. They're covered in blood and they're stabbing each other to make themselves look like the victims later on. And at first I didn't care for Billy's motive because I liked the idea of him not having a motive. I thought that was creepier. But I get it. I guess he did need something to push him that much over the edge. And the reaction that Sidney has of almost for a second feeling bad for him, and even Stu looked like he didn't exactly know his reason. I thought it worked for the moment. The writing in this movie is probably the strongest thing about it. I gotta give most of the credit, if not all, to Kevin Williamson, who wrote this script. This guy has written some of the best horror movies that I've ever seen, and I love the fact that he took the horror genre and flipped it. He put it on its head and said, look, we've been watching these movies for years. Let's make something smarter. Let's make something for the die-hard horror fans. And I love the fact that this was such a big, huge hit, because at the time it was a big, huge hit. Clearly, I'm talking this movie up like crazy. I'm praising it and praising it. I'm sure a lot of people don't love it as much as I do, but I can't help it. I love this film. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of Scream? Do you like it just as much as I do? Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Later!